Welcome, everyone, to the Special Education Inner Circle podcast. I'm your host, Catherine Witcher, and boy, do we have some information for you today. I have with me 6 Master IEP coaches who are ready to drop some special education truths and strategies that you need to hear. I'm talking real-time action steps that you can take as a parent, teacher, admin, or therapist. This is for everyone. If you're watching us live, you can go ahead and post questions below. If you're listening on the podcast, you'll see in the show notes how you can get a hold of everybody and get your direct IEP questions answered. So welcome everyone to our Master IEP Coach panel. We have Sandy, Brianne, Kirby, Lisa, Heather, and Bernie. And I'm actually going to start with Sandy. So Sandy's going to tell you who she is, how she ended up at an IEP table, and then she's going to go right into giving you her IEP tip that you can take and use right now.
Hi, everyone. Good afternoon. And Catherine, thank you again for this wonderful, amazing opportunity. I always love collaborating with the team. So as Catherine mentioned, I'm Sandy. I'm in Florida. I've been working on IEPs for about over 15 years since my son, Will, who's on the autism spectrum, had one. He's 22 years old now. And ever since his elementary world, we were working at that IEP table. And I ended up working later on in the school system as a paraprofessional and school librarian, and they would bring me in often to translate for the Spanish-speaking families during the IEP meetings. And that's where I really started to notice that not everybody had all the information and not all the parents knew what it was that they didn't know about the world of special education. And I said, this is where I need to be. That's my wheelhouse. And in particular, I have a love for helping the bilingual community. I'm fully bilingual. And so many times that's an underserved area. And of course I started working professionally as an advocate about 5 years ago, and I joined Catherine this past summer, and I love the mentorship, love the group, love these people. My tip for families today is there is a difference between screenings and evaluations. Oftentimes when families ask the schools to please evaluate their students, they're told, oh, well, we're going to go ahead and do a screening first and we'll see. Then later on, we'll figure out if they need the evaluation. There is a vast difference between the two. Screenings are brief tests. They are sometimes even just a simple checklist. And they're used to identify if a student's met certain milestones, if maybe they could benefit from a little extra help. An evaluation goes so much deeper. An evaluation can help diagnose learning disabilities. An evaluation can help identify areas of deficits, very specific pinpoint areas of deficits that are really important to help craft those goals and those services for the kids.
Absolutely. And I want to remind everybody who's listening that everything that we're talking about today has to do with the federal law. We're not lawyers, but we're going to tell you where to look. We're going to show you what action steps you can take to move towards achieving this appropriate education for your children and for your students. And there is no such thing as screenings in ideal law in a way of achieving an appropriate education. There are evaluations. So screenings are a very district level, very state level kind of process that are really just part of the system. And it's just a method that is used. So I love that, Sandy. Thank you for bringing that up, where we don't talk enough about screenings, evaluations, those first steps in getting in there. And with everything that's been happening in our education system, there's a lot of parents that are wondering about other areas that their child might need help with. And they're reaching out to the school and they're hearing those words, screenings and evaluations. So I love that piece. All right, let's go to Brianne. Brianne, will you tell us, how did you end up at an IEP table? What is your IEP tip for us today?
All right, so I ended up at the IEP table as first a sibling to, I have a 15-year-old brother, but I got a little deeper with my son, and I decided to become an advocate about 6 years ago when my son was about five or six, and he was about to get expelled. He was nonverbal. He's on the autism spectrum. And I knew sitting at that table of six people, I needed more support than just myself. And I stumbled across the Master IEP Coach maybe about a year or two later. And I decided I really loved the approach and said, you know what, I need to be a part of this. And so here I am a couple of years later. And I would say the number one tip I like to give to my clients and any parent is to ensure any type of phone conversation, in-person conversation you have, follow up with an email, just so you have that paper trail, so you can also refer back to anytime you need to. So that's my tip for everyone.
That's so important. You know, we have so much chaos that's happening in education right now, and following up with an email after a phone conversation is huge for a parent. That leads right into our next Master IEP coach, Heather, who's going to really elaborate on that from a teacher perspective. So Heather, share with us who you are, what you do, and keep this conversation going for us.
For sure. Thanks, Catherine, for having us, of course. I am a teacher in Illinois, and I've been a special education teacher for 7 years now. And I've always felt that the connection between parents and teachers was like never there. It was always two separate entities. And that's when I found Master IEP Coach. And I was like, I need to bring this world together. We need to figure out a better way to collaborate from teachers to parents. So I'm going to piggyback off of that last tip, and I'm going to make sure that we write down, if you have a request as a parent, if you have a request as a teacher, make sure it's in writing. Otherwise, it didn't happen. That is so important. I've had so many parents ask for certain things or say, hey, it'd be nice if we could try this, but never goes anywhere because it's never written down. It's just verbal. The people didn't get the right information. It's not in a document that says, hey, let's really try this out. So I would just really make sure that if you are requesting something for a change in an IEP or an extra class or whatever it is, just make sure it gets written down.
That's so important. So many times we have really collaborative conversations like you're talking about between parents and teachers, but it's lost just from the hustle and bustle of the school system. Then it just gets lost. And it's like, we have the best of intentions. And then the next thing you know, it's 90 days later, we're meeting for a parent teacher conference and somebody's getting thrown under the bus for something that was informally talked about, but not followed up on. So that is super important. And I love to hear that from a teacher's perspective, because a lot of times parents sit in front of their keyboard wondering, like, do I really do this? Do I really follow up? Do I really put this in writing? Like, I just talked to her on the phone. I'll just wait and see. I'll give her a chance to get started. A teacher doesn't care if you like write that email right away and say, that was a great conversation. It's my understanding. This is what's going to be happening next. So that's really important. All right. So now we have Lisa. Now, Lisa, we are halfway through our Master IEP Coach panel, and you know what? It's time for some celebration. So let's talk about some goodness that just happened. Can you share with us our celebration and then give us a tip?
Yes, I would love to share my celebration with all of you. I'm Lisa, and I became a Master IEP coach probably about 3 years ago now, because as a mother of a special needs child, he's on the autism spectrum. He's 17 now. He's had an IEP from all the way back to preschool. And at that time, I never felt like I was fully informed of understanding how I needed to advocate for my child. I felt like I was not making informed decisions on his behalf. And so I was seeking to gain more knowledge. And that is where I fell in love with Catherine's Master IEP Coach program, for I could better serve my son, but also other special needs families in my community. And so that leads to my celebration that yesterday, as I said, my son's 17 and on the autism spectrum, that he actually was able to drive to school by himself with a school permit. And that is a huge accomplishment based on the journey that we have taken over the last 17 years. And it's so vivid in my mind because it was so heart-wrenching at the time. So it will always be in my mind very clear that when he was in 5th grade and we were having extreme behavioral issues and academic delays, that a professional actually sat down with my husband and I and directly said to us that we should, in the near future, start exploring group homes for our child because he had maxed out. As a mama bear, I knew that there was so much more potential in my child than anyone else was seeing. We just needed to figure out how to tap into it. So that brings me to my tip that if I would have listened to that professional, we would have never accomplished this milestone, but rather what I did was made sure that my son received the services he needed to excel. And so I would highly recommend to all families and even teachers to make sure that no services are removed from a student's IEP until comprehensive evaluations are completed to make sure that the child has met those goals and that child no longer needs those services. Because I am the biggest proponent with families that I service as a Master IEP coach, and also with me founding my Future Readiness program, that all children have unlimited potential as long as they have the right supports and services.
Absolutely. So, here's what's frustrating. I'm going to share a little bit on a personal note here too. Many of you guys know I have a brother who has Down syndrome. He's 43, and group homes are always brought up in a way of almost giving up. And group homes shouldn't be thought of that way. There are a lot of fantastic options that really do help with inclusion in the community and having this group home environment. So you had a similar experience, Lisa, where they brought up a group home almost as it's time to give up on some things and just resign to the fact that they're going to have a certain kind of lifestyle. And first of all, a group home lifestyle can be great. Second of all, why are you setting a ceiling of like limits when a child's in 5th grade? That's just not a professional outlook at all. So, I love that you said comprehensive. That goes back to what Sandy was saying earlier of like, not just a screening, not just a guess. This is really comprehensive information. So I'm going to encourage everyone to make sure that as you are hearing these action steps, that you know that you can reach out to myiepcoach.com. Every one of our Master IEP coaches that's on the panel today, they're listed in the directory, or if you don't see them, you don't want to search for them in the directory, there's a form right at myiepcoach.com that you can put your name, your email, and say, hey, I need to talk to Lisa or Heather, Brianne, Sandy. Kirby and Bernie are coming up here with their tips. Just let us know, who are you hearing from that you're like, yes, I want to talk about this more, and make sure you go to myiepcoach.com, because the one thing that you need to know for sure is that you should not be doing special education alone. Being on this journey and trying to figure it out by yourself is going to cause you more heartache as a parent and as a teacher than is necessary. We promise that we can help you through this process. So,
absolutely.
All right, so let's go to Kirby. Kirby, will you tell us, how did you end up at an IEP table, and what's your action step for us?
Yes, I ended up at an IEP table because my son, when he was 2 years old, was diagnosed with severe nonverbal autism. And that was my first experience at the IEP table. I took that experience with my college degree in pre-law and left the meeting like, how can this be right? How is this adequate for all these kiddos? And so immediately I left there. I called disability rights, and I've been working with them ever since. And my biggest tip is for parents, because when I came in to the meeting the first time, I was a young mom. My husband was in the Navy, and I was there all by myself. And there were all these people that seemed like they knew my son, that they saw for an hour more than me. And it was overwhelming. And it took me a while to understand that I'm the expert on my kiddo, and that I can ask questions, I can request data, I can be the voice that he doesn't have. And I found myself to be a very valuable member of the IEP team. And I constantly remind my IEP team that I'm an equal member. And now we have a great collaborative relationship. And I think that if you go in there with that attitude, like, hey, I want to collaborate, I want to see what's going on, I want to know what I can do better, that really gives you as the parent some perspective of what is happening during the school day, and it also gives you some vital information as an IEP team member.
So Kirby, I love what you said there when you said you're the expert on your child and you want to have a collaborative mindset when you're going in there. And then you followed up with a key question. You said, and what can I do different or better? So parents who come in as an expert don't have to put up that shield or put on that armor and be ready for a fight. You can be the expert and still learn more. You can be the expert and still collaborate. So Kirby, I love that you just kind of naturally threw that into your tip of like, hey, go be the expert and go collaborate and go get some further information from the team, because they are going to know some things about your kiddo that you don't know. But that's okay. You can still be the expert. You can still know your child the best and accept some different information that's coming towards you and then put it all together. So I love that piece. So let's go to Bernie's tip that she's going to have for us. And then we've got a couple of questions that are here for us that we're going to go ahead and take those live and do a little Q&A. So Bernie, will you please tell us, how did you end up at an IEP table and what is your IEP tip for us?
Yes. Hi, everyone. My name is Bernie and I am from California. I'm actually in Berkeley, the Bay Area. I became a Master IEP coach because my oldest has ADHD. He also has a rare chromosome deletion that affects his learning. When he was in preschool, or actually when he was about 2.5, I started to see red flags. But I didn't know if those were red flags that were going to eventually go away. When he started preschool, I mentioned to the teacher, I said, these are my concerns. Could you let me know what we can do? She suggested that we go ahead and do an evaluation. And that's where it kind of started. At the beginning of it all, I was pretty naive. I was trusting the school, the district, on everything, what I had to do. So I was expecting for them to tell me what I needed to fill out, what I needed to know. And that wasn't really working. So the beginning of our journey was a really tough journey. And because I had a tough journey, I don't want other parents to experience the same thing, because like everyone's said, it's very overwhelming. It's super stressful. It is, you sometimes go to bed crying at night because you don't know what you're going to do. And because I've gone through that, I would want other parents to have a different experience. And so my tip for parents today is it's important to have a year-round communication with your team and your teacher. And if I would have known that back when I started, I think it probably wouldn't have been as hard as it was, because like I said, I was really naive. And so I was waiting for the district and for the school, the teachers, the team to come to me and to tell me what I had to do, or, pass information along to me. And I'm just sitting at home waiting instead of me reaching out to them. So now what I do is every start of the school year, if I introduce myself with the teacher, I hand them a get to know my child cheat sheet so that they know who my kid is. I even ask them to have a quick sit down to go over that. And I even ask for a transitional IEP meeting at the beginning of the school year because I want to be able to have it all on the table, communicate with the new teacher and the team where my child was at the end of the school year, where he's at this first 60, 90 days of school, and where we want him to go next. So I know sometimes, parents don't want to have those extra meetings, but I do. I like to call that, transitional meeting at the beginning of the school year, just so everyone's on the same page and just keep that year-round communication with the teacher and everyone constantly.
Absolutely. So some of the biggest miscommunication in special education happens because people are sitting and waiting. They're waiting for the other person to call them up, to send the email, to send home the data sheet. Like just ask, guys, just ask. So teachers, relieve your stress and just reach out to the parents if you haven't heard from them. I know I've done it as a teacher myself way back in the day when I was in the classroom. I was holding my breath sometimes. Like, I haven't heard from that parent in a while. I hope she's okay. I hope she's not getting ready to send me a 3-page email. Why did I not just ask? I don't know. So, and then why did the parent wait until there was a 3-page email? Because why were we not just talking? It's something that does not happen naturally on IEP teams very often. So I want to encourage people to do that. All right. So we have a question, and I'm definitely going to want to get Heather's feedback on this from a teacher's perspective. And then my parents who are here on the panel as Master IEP coaches, if you have any experience, direct experience with this, with a client or with your own child, I'd love to hear a couple of tips or just input on this. So this question is from Sheila. She's from Brooklyn. And she said, this remote learning thing is a nightmare for my son and I. Yep. We're hearing that in a lot of different places. The curriculum N2Y is not in his IEP. So for those of you who are not familiar, N2Y is an awesome special education curriculum that many school districts use. In fact, I think it's over 6,000 school districts across the country use N2Y. I have to give them a shout out because N2Y is a big supporter and collaborator of the Master IEP Coach program. They actually work with us to help us give a fantastic VIP weekend for our Master IEP coaches. We collaborate and share knowledge, and it is a really fantastic organization that is all on board with parents and teachers and teams all working together. So there's my shout out to N2Y. But it says that N2Y, the curriculum N2Y is not in his IEP and it's way above his capacity, which tells us that accommodations, modifications, those aren't happening. But here's the second part. She says, and now they're asking me about assessing him remotely. And this is a big roadblock that's happening. So Heather, you're in the classroom virtually. I'm sure that you've had some conversations of assessments and stuff come up. And I believe that you are working with students that may be using some type of N2Y type of curriculum. So can you just pop in here and give some feedback of what are some things that Sheila should be doing as a mom, maybe asking, or what should she be expecting?
No, of course. So I am actually using N2Y with my students as well. And I am a remote teacher all year long. So this is totally in my realm. So first off, I want to say N2Y is not in his IEP because teachers generally don't do that, because if a student gets transferred to a different teacher that doesn't use that curriculum, then there's a whole slew of things because their goal is now aligned to a curriculum that they're no longer using. Is that goal still meaningful? There's a whole thing that goes with it. So that's why it's not in his IEP specifically stating that he is using N2Y. And if it's above his capacity, I would just say, I know I don't have a whole lot of information to go off of, but is it the reading comprehension? Is it the understanding? Is it the fluency? Is he reading? Is he not? So I think that's why they're asking about the assessment for him remotely. So the two options I know of, and anybody please chime in, is they can do it virtually through the screen with him. They can share their screen. He can answer, point to an answer. You can tell you know, the teacher what he pointed to. So that's an option. You can definitely, a teacher can assess him remotely, not you assessing him remotely. So there should be a little bit of help from the school by that way. They shouldn't be asking you to do that whole thing by yourself. The other option I know that my school is doing is they are allowing families to bring the child in for an in-person assessment if needed. I know everybody's comfortability is different right now. So that is an option if you would like to ask, can I bring my child in for a 1-hour assessment? There might be other things that they can do with him while he's there, if that's something you're comfortable with. Otherwise, I would say try to ask about a teacher assessing him remotely.
Absolutely. So that's what I'm hearing across the country, is that there is a lot of collaboration that has to happen between the parent and the teacher to get this done through the screen. But it is possible. Now, will it be as clear of a number? Meaning, is this the same as sitting side by side? No, we have to make notes and say how it was given through the screen, how many prompts were used. But what's great is, even if the parent does some extra prompting, which quite honestly is what the habit is of a parent, because they're working on the assessment and that, the teacher can see it. So the teacher can just take a note of how many prompts were given to get to that answer. And that's additional data on there. If any other Master IEP coaches have any experience with that, go ahead. Brianna.
Yes, I will also add, if your state still have psychologists or things that are actually still taking patients in their office, collaborate that way. Ask, where are you willing to contract with such and such? A lot of times I like to bring the psychologist to them, and then they work out that contract, because it tends to make it a little easier, and the school can translate, well, this is the type of things that needs to be assessed. They can work out the kinks. But as we've mentioned in all of our tips, always follow up. You as the parent initiate that conversation, because you will tend to get thrown out of the loop because everybody's waiting for somebody to say something. And as far as the curriculum, I'm with Heather on that. They don't typically do that, just because if you decide to move, so you're changing districts and things like that, that can create a whole issue. But if it was recommended or stated that this is curriculum he should or should not be using, then that should be maybe in an email or somewhere, or that needs to just be clearly communicated across the board. So if a change does happen, say, hey, this is what he was using. Do you have something similar?
I love that.
So that's been my
love
experience.
that tip, Brianne, of making sure that we look to outside resources if appropriate. So there has been a lot of that during this distance learning, where maybe the school can't do the walk-in services like Heather's stating, but they're open to the idea of the child doing a walk-in service to somebody else. And outside, that's not a school contracted employee. That is somebody who's in the community, as a community provider in that way. So I love that tip. And it's so important for us to continue to collect this data. We actually decided not to talk a whole lot about data in general, because we talk about it all the time as Master IEP coaches. Like on every podcast episode, we're talking about data because it's that important. So now we're giving you this framework on how you can truly get to the data, because that's what everybody's saying. Like, well, that's great. I want the data. I hear you telling me to get the data. I don't know how to get that data. Okay. Now that we have all of our tips. Okay. So let's do a little rapid fire. I did not tell you guys I was going to ask you this question. So who's ever ready is just going to go ahead and say their opinion on this, because there is no right answer. I love to let people know your favorite part of the IEP, or maybe a part of the IEP that people don't look at very often. You don't tell us all about it. We'll do that on another episode, but give us like a tip, because like, for example, one of my favorite parts of the IEP is that accommodations and modifications. So when a parent comes to me like Sheila, who just had that question and was like, hey, like this curriculum's not working. It's not, my son doesn't have the capacity to work at the curriculum that's being put at him. I'm not going to blame the curriculum or the teacher or that situation until I look at supports and services and say, is everything being implemented to make this possible? And that's a piece that gets looked at last a lot of time. And I want to look at that first to see that. So who here has their favorite part of the IEP that they hope everybody looks at first.
I would say for me, it's that parent input statement that's in every child's IEP. It might be called something a little bit different, such as parent concerns. But that is, to me, I utilize that as the foundation to provide a baseline of what the parents are wanting their child to have for their future, but also what their concerns are, what their vision and goals are for not just that current year, but even the next 3, 4, 5 years down the road. And that then allows the entire team to be on the same page and is able then to create a very meaningful IEP for that child, because that's kind of their navigation. That
I love that. So parent input statement, also known as parent educational concerns, no matter where you're at in which state, no matter how old your child is, whether they're 3 coming into the system or they're 19 working on their transition plan and job training, that parent input is key for that. All right. So who else has a place where people need to go and look? Brianne.
Yes, I would definitely say the present levels, because the present level is going to drive the goals. You cannot create a goal without anything that's in that present levels. And so that present level talks about their strengths and their weaknesses. So that's one that I really tend to pay attention to. And I have parents pay attention to that as well.
100%. Those present levels, you can't get to where you're going if you don't know where you're starting. That's all present levels are doing. They're just telling you where you're starting. Okay, who's got a favorite part? Bernie has one.
Oh,
well, it's not I wouldn't say it's a favorite, because I don't know if I have a favorite part of the IEP. It's probably the whole thing. But an area that I tend to kind of get drawn to is the services and minutes. Because when you are sitting at the table, they'll, say to you, 90 minutes for the week or something like that, and at the very beginning for me, I kept asking, can you break that down? What exactly does that mean? How many days a week, how many minutes per day, that can be very confusing to a parent to not have the breakdown of the minutes, because they give you just a total of minutes for the whole week. And then also whether services are being given to your child in a group or individually. I like to kind of go over that and just make sure that the parent understands and knows that area of what their kid is actually getting.
Yeah, 100%. So I've worked in a district as not as a teacher, as a Master IEP coach, working with parents, and we're going through the IEP, and they wrote all of their minutes by quarter. Like quarter's a long time. And so, they have like these gazillion minutes, it looks like, and then it says per quarter. And then you ask, so is this going to, how are we going to build consistency? Do they get services every week? And they're like, well, we try to do that. And they're really just kind of clustering the services together to make sure that the quarter minutes were met, but not always consistently. How do you make progress in speech if you're not practicing your skills on a consistent basis? So, Bernie, you're absolutely right. Like that service page, you said minutes written weekly. And I know that somebody listening to this is going to be like, wait, what? Like they have minutes written weekly? Like ours are monthly or by quarter or that. And yeah, it can be all different. You absolutely have to clarify that. Okay, Sandy, you had something for me.
So Bernie kind of stole my thunder there, but I have a second one. See, great minds think alike, One that I also love is the support for school personnel. And this may be called something different in different districts, but towards the end of the IEP, teachers, many of them will not push for this for themselves, that they're able to receive training and support in some of the different services or behavior supports, or if a student has an assistive technology or an AAC device, or if the behavior analyst has been working with the student creating a behavior plan, the teachers can be given support and training in this and have consultation periodically, and the parents can as well. And it's quite often overlooked.
Absolutely. I love that section, especially when it comes to this virtual learning environment that a lot of people are going to be using for the rest of the school year. I think we thought like, well, when this first started, it's like, okay, 30 days, 60 days, 90 days. Then we got back to school and now it's longer and longer. And it's like these little Band-Aid fixes that we did, that's not going to work, for the rest of the school year. It's time to dig in and make sure that everybody has the training that they need on all different levels, including virtual learning. So, all right, Heather, what do you have for us from a teacher perspective? What piece should we be looking at?
I love the notification
Oh my
of
goodness,
conference.
you haven't had that one before.
That's a good one.
I know.
Notification
So I love-
of conference.
Go
So
ahead.
that initial notification that goes out before the meeting.
Oh my gosh, I could talk about this forever, but I remember being a new teacher. Oh my gosh, I could get in so much trouble, but not sending it out. Like, blows my mind that I did that. And I know other teachers do it. Like, I don't want to admit that, but other teachers don't send those out. They like plan it, email just, hey, we're meeting at this time on this day. And there's no notification of conference. So teachers, please send those out. And parents, make sure you're getting them. Like,
and look at the checked boxes, right? Like, please see what you're walking into. Look at what the checked box is. I've had a lot of parents that said, I thought I was walking in for an IEP meeting, but it was really just a domain meeting. And if you don't know what a domain meeting is, that's we use different terms in different states for this, but basically domain meetings, just where you sit down every few years and you decide what testing needs to take place to make sure that a child's still eligible for services. So we call that a domain meeting here in Illinois. So they thought like, oh, I'm going for this IEP meeting. They lost like days of sleep. They went through boxes of Kleenex, and all of a sudden they realized they walked in and they were out in 15 minutes because all they were doing was deciding on the testing. They thought they were like getting testing results and all that. It hadn't even started yet.
Yeah.
So, Heather, I'm actually going to continue this conversation just for a second here right now, because somebody I know that they're thinking like, what do you mean? Why is a teacher not doing their job and not sending it out? This is not something they teach us in college, correct?
No, they don't, or they do and they overlook it completely. Because we go through the whole IEP, how to write it, everything that needs to be stated in there. But like nobody says you need to send this out before the meeting, not day of the meeting, not 2 days before the meeting. You need to send this out weeks before the meeting when you are scheduling it, when you've originally come up with a plan. And you shouldn't be planning an IEP meeting 2 days in advance. Please don't do that. That's the other thing too.
Heather's going to lecture us all on how the process works for the timeline for an effective IEP. I think that'll be an upcoming episode because
that'll be a good one,
right? That would be good, right? You guys need to know that. We know that as Master IEP coaches, but you, the listeners, you guys need to know, what does this look like from a parent standpoint, from a teacher standpoint, when we put those timelines together for that. So on that note, all right, you guys have given me something on my to-do list to start planning out of when we're going to talk about that. I want to say thank you to Sandy, Brianne, Heather, Lisa, Bernie, and Kirby for being here today and really helping to put special education back together, because we all know that it's fallen apart. I'm not sad about that. I'm sad of why it's happening. I'm sad of how it's being handled, but I welcome the opportunity to put special education back together better than it was before. If you're listening to this and you're like, I need to talk to a Master IEP coach, again, head over to myiepcoach.com. If you just had your heart set on fire in a way that you were like, I need to be with these people, I need to learn more of this, I want to do what they're doing, you need to head over to masteriepcoach.com. You can get all the information on how all the Master IEP coaches are working together on these special education initiatives to make sure that parents and teachers are building appropriate IEPs for the real world. On that note, I will talk to you guys next time.